But really it's this nexus between science, research, and policy that we search to tease out as an overlapping Venn diagram that seems like there should be data-informed policy making in whatever region, on whatever issue. But since we're focused on the Arctic, we look at programs like this as yet one more service to try to inform, but also help influence the policies that need to be carried out.
Whatever you are doing, you need to take weather into account. This is the fact. And whenever we are talking about something that is taking or happening over the Arctic areas, this is even more so. In the Arctic areas, you couldn't do anything without understanding the weather.
Lack of observations is one of the key issues, and satellites are the key of monitoring those kind of things.
And so by gaining and working towards, from a research and an observation perspective, of being able to measure the Arctic and be able to forecast in the Arctic better, will have, I'll say, positive influence and impacts down in the lower 48.
And we look at the Earth in its entirety. So that means we're looking at the atmosphere, we're looking at the ocean, we're looking at the ice, we're looking at the land surface, we're looking at what we can below the surface in an integrated way, and not just trying to understand the Earth system components, but the mechanisms that couple them.
Actually, I think the experience of the Arctic Council in general is very basic to this issue. They have dealt with this for probably since the beginning, and I think they have really established a very good mechanism to deal with many of these issues. And I think that's where the meteorological community, will benefit tremendously for much closer collaboration with the Arctic Council.
So, of course, action on a regional scale is necessary because of the rapid changes that will affect humans and nature more quickly in the Arctic than elsewhere. And it must be based on the best available knowledge and take fully into account the needs of Arctic indigenous peoples and other Arctic inhabitants.
A foundation on 3 themes, and it's based off a tabletop exercise. 3 particular themes here: overlapping nation-state claims in the Arctic, increased maritime activity, and maritime incidents.
The discussions in reaction to the scenarios focused on how the various Arctic stakeholders, and that was not just the countries, but also the scientific community, indigenous communities, that would also be trade interests, energy companies, how each of them would react to the scenario, and also what other alternative scenarios could have presented more challenges or been more interesting than the ones we came up with.
Countries and other stakeholders have been really good through those institutions and frameworks in getting ahead of emerging issues, like in the Central Arctic Ocean and fishing and things like this. And one that seems to beg the question, is security an emerging issue that the Arctic countries need to get ahead of?
We have never been in a position in the world, he said, where access to an entire ocean opened up within a matter of decades, right? And that's really why we're here today. That's why we're all concerned about it. And that's why it's important to sort of stress test, if you will, the continuing resilience of Arctic cooperation.
But I don't think today we need to surge right now in terms of equipment or this type of thing, but we've got to improve our awareness both of the air and sea domain, and we make sure that we have the capabilities that we can put up there should we have to. But right now, I think we sit tight.
That is, there are other places on the planet where NATO's attention is much more warranted. And there is some concern, I have some concern, that if they were to focus serious resources and effort and attention on an Arctic region that is generally one of the more peaceful areas of the world,
Right.
What is the cost in terms of areas that actually require serious attention, in my view?
satellite technology in the Arctic cannot be overstated. It helps us better understand climate change, get more precise weather forecasts, navigate safely, and monitor the environment. Norway is a world leader in this field. This would not have been the case without the long-standing Norwegian-American cooperation on space technology.
The image that people have of the Arctic is multifaceted, as the ambassador mentioned. It might be of ice, of remote communities, of ocean, more ice, polar bears, climate change, resources, and more ice again. Now, these are all concepts which exist in the Arctic, and this is important, and they are all important, but they do not constitute the region alone. There are also thriving, modern, technologically advanced, knowledge-based, connected, smart societies in the north, and which I hope we will prove here today, also with smart people.
Space and the Arctic are connected. We have a three-dimensional Arctic, but it's actually more than that. It's a four-dimensional Arctic because it used to be mostly governments, and now it's companies like KSAT, which is partly owned by the Norwegian government, and entirely private companies like SpaceX, which are now redefining the field. And this is all very, very exciting, but it also means that we can't get stuck in old ways of thinking. That some of these new opportunities provided by these new private actors are opening up fields and chances for technological advancement that we could have only dreamed of just a couple of years ago.
People don't want to operate where they have big unknowns, and they don't want to operate into areas there might be danger. And until you actually have the technology in place, there's a reluctance to be able to make major investments into those areas.
If we don't have satellites and the right type of satellites, this is what you see.
Yeah. Yes.
You see nothing. It's pitch dark. It happens that we have 24-hour sunlight in the summertime, but most of the time in the winter, this is what you will see. And that's why you need to use technology to solve that situation. And the radar satellites are the only one that can really do the job for you.
There's a growing interest for and presence in the Arctic. We see new satellite technologies and combined applications that are emerging. With more AS receivers in space, and with the addition of supporting technologies, we can improve the detection of the actual maritime traffic in the Arctic.
Is that the growing interest in the Arctic is now. We talk about it a lot in some of our scientific discussions about how in the future there'll be more human presence and more activity in the Arctic, but the truth is it's happening now, as your slides have shown. And combining the satellite technologies increases the situational awareness in the Arctic, as well as in the polar regions in general. So
what you're finding is they're not building those systems just to serve the Arctic. They're actually building those systems to actually serve other markets. In the case of the undersea cables, the goal there is to go from Asia to Europe in a shorter route, quicker path, so you get that data that everybody wants, you get it quicker. So the interesting thing is, in satellite systems, same thing. They're not being built to serve the Arctic. They're just going to be going over the poles simply because of the path of their orbits. Those are opportunities for the Arctic.
But as you can see, here are two very different examples of where we've been able to actually help overcome some of the challenges of serving in the Arctic. But there are other locations where the digital divide continues to be real, and that's where I see the continued promise and opportunity of satellite.
And one key question we have to discuss here is who's going to pay for the opportunities. Because in a modern world, I think digital infrastructure is fundamental for good living.
And not to suggest that climate is not still very, very important, and we have to address that, but maybe we need to push out more to ensure that this aspect, this role of technologies and satellites and communications in a better connected Arctic moves to the top of the list.
For so many, centuries, we've been dependent on one country, and we are in the process of diversifying both our relations, international relations, but also trade and economic relations, and that's going to continue.
This idea of these Greenland dialogues are in one way a microcosm of what's happening around the globe, but also components of what's happening around the Arctic at large. And they touch us from research to economic development to just overall governance and the way in which we were able to pay our bills each and every day. So these are no longer isolated issues, and to me this has been one Venn diagram of Greenland and transformation, a global Arctic transformation, and a new ocean and transformation.
It's fair to say that Greenland is held to a high esteem among a lot of indigenous peoples around the world. Because of what it is that we had achieved, and what it is that we aspire to. But I think at the same time we're also very conscious, that we don't want to just copy and export what it is that we have gained throughout the process. Because I think each case all around the world, or even around the Arctic, is special.
What is the National Guard Arctic Interest Council? In a nutshell, it's comprised of executive leadership and subject matter experts in homeland security and homeland defense from 18 of the 54 National Guard states.
So when we think about extreme cold weather operations, we think about potential operations in the Arctic as our country sets that course. from the National Military Command Authority and from the national elected officials, how might that fit the National Guard?
And I think it's very important that we help the Department of Defense and the Army focus some of its effort on research and development of tactics and techniques that allow us to operate in extreme cold weather.
Ungoverned spaces will eventually be governed. And what the council can do is help provide a presence and activity in that region through training with our soldiers and our airmen to assist the military in meeting the long-term goals, which will eventually assist in our national security strategy.
When you look at the opening up of the Arctic oceans, when you look at the opening up of the region, you see, tourism growing. You see the economic things growing, transportation, the mining, all different types of economic factors. They're all bringing people to the Arctic. When you have people, the National Guard takes on a very, very important role in that ability to provide domestic response.
We can't do it by ourselves, and it takes a lot of partners. And one of the things that the Guard prides itself is our partnerships and the fact that we work with other countries, we work with the services, we work with Department of Homeland Security, we work with our state agencies, and so we have all these partnerships, and we can communicate these issues and these problems and these obstacles. We can communicate with them maybe better than anybody else can.